In this video, I'm going to be going over one of the most powerful principles when it comes to reality creation, something called the mirror principle, and how I use this principle specifically to generate a six-figure business. Now, not only did I use it to generate a six-figure business, it's not just any six-figure business that's continually growing, and I fully expect we'll get to seven-figure before long, but it's one I absolutely enjoy. It's not one where I had to stress and struggle and any of these different things, because when you actually utilize these natural universal principles, you'll find that things like struggling and stress and strife and kind of grinding and hustling your way to the finish line isn't required. In fact, doing those things gets in the way a lot of the time of the goals we're aiming from our heart to actually achieve or have come into our lives. And so I'm going to explain what the mirror principle is and explain how to use it so that you can utilize this incredibly useful and powerful, immutable principle of the universe in your own life. Now, also, this doesn't just work for finances. I use that because I know it's a powerful example of how it's worked for me. But it's also worked in every other area of my life. My health has been just never better. My relationship, I fell in love with someone through this principle, through kind of doing this work that you're going to learn about today, and now we have a beautiful family together. It gave me the courage and the kind of encouragement to move basically to the other side of the planet, to live on my own terms and generate all this freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, and everything else for myself. And so it has been a huge influence in my life, and I want to at least get you started, if you're up for it, on how to use this yourself. So again, this principle that we're talking about is called the mirror principle. Now, what I want you to understand with this principle is first and foremost what it means in a nutshell. And if we're boiling it down to its most basic form, so we're boiling it down to just its absolute core kind of saying or what it represents, it's simply this, that the outer world follows the inner. Now, what does that mean, that the outer world follows the inner? Well, first, let's go over what the outer world is. This is very simple. This is the one that you're all familiar with. This is the physical world, the world of matter. So the outer world, everything outside of yourself, including your physical body, but everything outside, right? Anything that can be perceived by your five senses, more or less, is contained with what we can consider the outer world. However, as you can see, we're not talking about the outer world being the thing here, right? Or the base reality. We're saying that the outer world, so the physical world, follows, as in takes its lead from what we call the inner world. And again, in a nutshell, this is what the mirror principle is pointing at and telling us. Now let's go over what the inner world actually is, how the outer world follows that, so you know how to utilize this a little bit more. So we're going to move over to this little triangle right here, and I want you to think of this triangle like the self. This is you. You're represented by this triangle, okay? And everyone knows, and we all are aware, that there is a physical side to us, right? So even though the outer follows the inner, and this physical world follows what we're calling the inner, there's no denying that there is a physical world. We might argue or debate on what that actually is. What is physical matter reality? Is there actually anything called physical matter? Is that a real thing? Which we'll get into. But we have something that we call the physical, and we experience it, and we live in it. So fine, that exists. So we have this physical side to us. We know the laws to the physical very precisely. They're finely tuned. A lot of them coming from Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. The Newtonian paradigm we're very, very familiar with. But if this is the self, then it leaves these other two sides of the self that are going unaccounted for here, right? And this is where we start to get into the inner part of ourselves. Because not only are you a physical being, you are actually a three-part being. And this is just a model to make it simple. We could get more nuanced. I'm sure we could do this even further depending on how we want to label all this. But just keep in mind that you are a three-part being. So not only are you physical, but you're also mental. There is a mental side of you, right? You have thoughts, you have imaging, you have visualizations, you think about things, right? And you think of these things and you don't see them immediately in the physical. They're clearly not in this physical space. I can think about a pink elephant, doesn't appear, right? It's not here in this space. It's not physical, yet it exists. I'm able to pinpoint it. I'm able to focus on certain things within my mind's eye. I can control that process and can get even better at controlling it as I work on it. So there's this mental side of you as well. However, there's also a third side. And this is the spiritual part of yourself, or spirit. Now, one thing I want you to almost make synonymous, not maybe completely, because there is definitions beyond this we can give it, but I want you to think about spirit also equaling energy. It is the energetic part of yourself, right? So let's dive into this a little bit more. You are a three-part being made up of physical. So we got physical, mental, and spiritual. So you're not just this one thing, this physical, compilation of, atoms, and you're the fleshy thing that's just moving around, right? You're not an automaton. You are someone that you're behind the wheel, your consciousness, and there's more to you than just this physical aspect of yourself, right? So we know we're physical, but we have these two as well. Now with mental, so we'll just go down here for it. Again, we already talked about this, but you can think of this like the part of yourself that thinks. This is your thoughts, your imaging, visualizations, things of this nature. Thinking, we said. This is your thinking. You could also say mindset, beliefs. It's that side of you, right? These are not tangible things you can hold in your hand, but they still exist, and they're still a part of you, right? So that's the mental. But let's dive into the spiritual part as well, because this is interesting. Like I mentioned, this is already has something to do with energy. This is also your connection to something greater. So we're going to say the divine or divinity. We could also say oneness. We could say what the Hermetics would say. We could say the all. But I also want you to recognize this as your emotional self. And I want us to break down this word in particular. It's going to give you a better idea of what this is all about, but it's also going to give you a much clearer view on how to utilize this part of yourself in order to create through the mirror principle. So when you see emotional, let's break down emotion. And I want you to think about it as energy. I don't know why I put it down there. In motion. So it still comes back to being energy, right? And so you have these three parts of yourself: the mental, the spiritual, the physical. The physical part, it's the five senses that you're moving around this physical world. The mental, your thoughts, your visualizations, your thinking, your imaging, your mindset, your beliefs, mental processes, whatever you want to say, any things of that nature. And then you have the spirit part of yourself, spirit and energy. This is your connection to something larger than yourself, to the whole, to oneness, to the greater consciousness system, to God, to source, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter what label you use, the all. This is also the emotional self, how you are and what you are dwelling in emotionally, right? Now, why is this important? Because understanding mental and the spiritual part of yourself is you beginning to understand the inner part that we're talking about here. And why is that important? Because as the mirror principle states, the outer follows the inner, meaning this one is taking cues from the mental and spiritual. These two right here are the inner. That is the inner world, right? So these two make up the inner world we're talking about, that the outer follows, that the physical follows. And so if the physical, all the stuff around us, the thing that everybody wants money and all these things about, is following the inner, then if you want to expand in the physical realm, if you want to receive more, if you want to experience more physically, you have to first experience certain things mentally and spiritually. Now, one thing that's important to recognize here is the law or principle of cause and effect. This is also in Hermetic wisdom. We could also look at this as the law of balance and harmony, but this is a huge component of the mirror principle, because why is it that the outer follows the inner? Why is it what we do in the inner leads to certain results in the outer? And depending on what you do in the inner will lead to different results in the outer. Why? Because the mirror principle follows the law of cause and effect, except on the higher planes of existence. The physical being the lower plane of existence, The mental and spiritual being the higher planes of existence. The mental and spiritual are the causes. It's important to keep in mind. They are the causes. The effects of those causes can be observed on the physical. The mirror principle, put in another way, could be stated as cause and effect at a higher level. What you do in the inner will be reflected, will have effects in the physical, corresponding on the same frequency of a like kind of whatever you're doing on the mental and spiritual planes of your existence. This is why you hear quotes such as, "You get what you think about most of the time." Why? Because if you're thinking in a certain way, which activates the mental, you will feel a certain way as well that corresponds with the way you're thinking. You can test this out. For example, I want you to think of something that you love. I want you to think of a loved one. I want you to think of a pet. I want you to think of something that you cherish. And just think about it for a few moments. I really want you to focus on it. Bring that picture up in your mind's eye on the mental plane of your existence. I want you to bring that up. Now, how do you feel? Do you feel different than you did maybe moments ago? Now, depending on how good you are at this and the level of your focus, it might take you a little bit longer. Some of you, it might be instantaneous. But regardless, if you were to focus on that long enough on the mental plane, through thinking it, through visualizing it, through focusing on it, you would start to notice that the spiritual side of yourself, the emotional self, the energy in motion, the energy changed just through focusing your thoughts. Now, when you thought of something that you really enjoyed, did you feel bad? No, you felt good. Now, you could do this on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not going to prompt you to do it because I don't want to prompt you into a negative feeling. But it would work the other way around. If you thought of something, an embarrassing moment, I won't prompt you. But if you thought of things like that, and I could prompt you, I could say, I could make you think of some things you probably don't want to think about. But ultimately, if you thought about those things, there would be a corresponding and aligned emotion that would come paired with that. This is actually also known as the principle of correspondence, which I believe is the second principle in Hermetics. It's basically, if you've heard the saying, as above, so below, and as below, so above, that's this principle, right? If you do one thing on one plane, there will be correspondence on the other plane, meaning all of these planes are following each other. Everything has correspondence. Meaning, if you do something on one plane, it influences the other. There is no doing one thing on one plane and it not having this somewhat of an effect on another, right? For example, you think of a certain way and you're feeling a certain way. You feel a certain way, you're going to start thinking about certain things. Your body language probably changes as well too. Now, cause and effect at this deeper level, basically, as the mirror principle will tell us, if you dwell in certain things on the mental and spiritual plane of your existence long enough, by law, there will have to be corresponding effects in your physical plane of existence. So how does this work? For example, you get what you think about most of the time. Let's say you thought and you switched your thinking to one of opportunity, to one of love, to where you thought about what it is you do want all of the time and you believed you could have it, where you think only positively, or it doesn't have to be only positively, but the majority of the time. You've tipped the scales to that. And now you're feeling good most of the time too. You've tipped the scales of the spiritual to dwell in good feelings, in higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of thinking. Then what the mirror principle states, by the outer world follows the inner, is that by law, not by chance, not by this happens for some people and doesn't for others. This is an immutable principle. By law, you would have to start seeing corresponding changes in your physical. Now, the physical does take a little bit longer to catch up. And in just a moment, I'm going to erase this and explain and show you a visual of exactly why that is. Because you might say, well, I've been thinking and feeling this way and there's been no changes. Yeah, you just haven't been doing it long enough and consistently long enough. And you probably thought a certain way a certain amount of time and felt it for a little bit of time. And then you went back to the old thinking and back to the old feeling. And you're actually in that way more often. For if we were on a seesaw, you basically have one huge person on this side, and you've tried to put someone here that's not even close to equaling out the weight or tipping the scale, right? So we need to reduce that side and get this one to come down more so that you are in that place more often. You're dwelling in the high conscious emotions. That was a terrible analogy, but I think you know what I'm saying here, right? So we need to tip the scale so that your inner world is in a place where you're thinking about what you want most of the time. You're feeling good most of the time because via the mirror principle, the outer world is going to have to follow. And this is verified. I've done this so many times myself with clients. You can hear of other people who have done this. It works, and it will work for you if you use it. Now, I'm going to erase all this in just a moment, and I want to explain why it takes longer for things to happen on the physical plane versus the mental and spiritual. Because, for example, imagine $1 million in your bank account. So long as you don't have massive limiting beliefs and blocks that won't even let you visualize that, you can think of that pretty easily, right? I could also, again, elicit a certain emotion within you very, very quickly. It wouldn't take much. I could just show you some images or tell you to think a certain way or just focus on a certain feeling, and it would be elicited instantaneously. You can feel love and joy, depression and guilt, willingness and acceptance and courage instantaneously, depending on what you focus on. You can think instantaneously pretty much on almost anything. You cannot instantaneously have something appear in the physical, and there's a reason for it, and let's jump into why that is. Okay, so we've already gone over a bunch of things on how this mirror principle works. We've gone over how the inner world is what's leading the outer, so the outer will follow it. But if that's the case, why is it when I can think about maybe something and focus on it for a whole day, nothing shows up? Well, this is why. There are kind of two ends to the pole of the stuff of our reality. So let's just, to make this simple, I don't want to use blue here, I want to use black. At the bottom of this pole, we have the physical, right? At the top of this pole, we have spirit, which we can also say is energy. And throughout this pole, let's just say there's infinite amount of variations, meaning higher up the pole you go, the more spirit energy something becomes. And there's millions of different calibrations and vibrations and modes here. And the lower you go down, you keep going until you get to the grossest, most dense matter, our physical matter reality. So the bottom is the most dense, the most physical. At the top, we have the spiritual. One thing to recognize, if everything's on the same pole, there actually isn't any difference in kind between the physical stuff and the energetic or the spiritual. Remember that three-part being you are? It's actually all made of the same stuff. It's just different rates of vibration. So if we're just to do this here, everything that you see is actually made of the same thing at a different rate of vibration. This is also another Hermetic principle that's touched upon. This is the principle of polarity. There's also a principle of vibration, that everything moves, nothing rests, everything's always in motion. That's not exactly the quote, but basically that everything is vibrating. And so even though the physical and the spiritual or energy appear like completely different things, one appears solid while the other you can't see with your physical senses, like your sight and everything else. You can develop certain intuitive abilities which can make them more perceptible, but these are not usually the ones we're taught. However, even though these appear as completely different things, like this pen is physical matter reality, and for me to say, well, this is exactly the same as energy or spirit, it might seem laughable until you recognize that it is simply a dense form of vibration of energy, understanding that everything, this one's in cursive for some reason, is energy. We could also say consciousness. And that all of this, everything down to the grossest form of physical matter, all the way up to the fastest, most pure form of spirit and energy, all is energy, consciousness. All is the same thing of a like kind. It's a good one to put up here. So of a like kind, made of the same stuff, but vibrating at a different rate of vibration. And it's like everything being made of clay, but just fashioned into different things. That's not the best analogy because, again, it's basically infinite on what can appear here. But it's all made of the same building materials. Again, if you were to look at anything physical under the right instruments, you know what you would find? You would find that it's actually vibrating. That if you were to go even deeper, you would find the energy that is making up that physical matter. And you would find that this thing that appears still, like it's purely physical, that it's not moving, it is vibrating just at a very dense rate rather than a very fast, more free rate. That's about it, the difference. And if you were to actually speed up the vibration of this pen, and you would continue to speed up the vibration, you would get to a point when it would go past the speed of light and not be visible on the physical plane anymore. If we were to change the rate of vibration, would change the way we perceive it, the form of this pen, or anything, name anything physical. Now, why this is important to understand is because if we have concentrated particle flow, if we have concentrated energy, if we have concentrated thought on the mental and spiritual planes together in a particular direction, then it will start being reproduced in the physical. However, the physical, remember, is a dense, slow rate of vibration. So it takes consistent, persistent energy, concentrated particle flow, not I'm going to focus here, then I'm going to focus here, I'm going to focus here, I'm going to focus on 20 different things, or get distracted over here and distracted over here. We're talking about focus like a laser beam. And what you focus on like a laser beam, or put your focus on most of the time, you get what you think about most of the time will start to be mirrored in your physical world. Now, are we saying that, you know, if I focus hard enough that this is going to like materialize before my eyes? No, this is sci-fi thinking. Remember, it doesn't happen that way in the physical. It is a dense rate of vibration. It takes a lot of energy and build up for these to start coming into the physical. And they're not going to materialize, at least not as far as I've heard of, just in front of your eyes like that. Again, that would be much more instantaneous. That would be much more how spirit and energy acts, or thought, that just poof can come in and out, right? That would be acting much more like something that it is not, or at least not the rate of vibration it's at. However, when you, with concentrated particle flow, start focusing on something like a laser beam on the inner world, changes by law, again, not by happen chance or happenstance, you know, not by willy-nilly. Some people get lucky, some people do not. No, not at all. By immutable law, physical changes have to start occurring. Now, how do these changes start showing up? How do they come in? Well, I'll tell you one thing, they're not going to come in the way you expect. That's very linear thinking, very physical world level thinking. A plus B plus C plus D equals, you know, exactly this outcome. This is why when you so want a certain outcome to happen, a lot of times it doesn't. There's also a law of balance that makes it so it's not either. Usually throwing a lot of fear at it, a lot of certain expectant energy that's very negative. And so what are you doing on the spiritual plane? Okay, it's pretty negative. You're thinking pretty negatively. You get certain negativity then, outcomes coming in your physical. You get more people complaining at you and moaning. You get certain obstacles in your life. You get more thoughts of the same. That promotion you wanted didn't come in, whatever else it is. But when you concentrate your particle flow from this inner world place, you will start noticing certain opportunities seemingly coming out of nowhere. You will start noticing different people somehow make their way into your life and provide maybe some of these opportunities, or help you to see something differently, or say something to you that just absolutely resonates in the moment that you needed to move on to something else, to the next level. Or you needed that information for whatever else. A video pops up for you, for example, a book, whatever. These things start to come in. And again, those things seem small, but I promise you they're not. If you follow that line, these things become massive. But the opportunity one, and we could say also events, we could say circumstances to a degree, I won't put that down there, but opportunities are one of the big ones. You will start noticing new opportunities that you would have never been able to think of, or them coming in the ways that they do, starting to come into your life. Why? Because you are now starting to focus on certain things up here that are higher. You're starting to tip the scale to more positive emotions, more positive thoughts through correspondence, or the other way, which means certain physical things that are of a like frequency, a like energy, have to start coming in. You see, if you're thinking fear all the time on the spiritual plane, or you're feeling fear, and let's just say similar emotions, and then on the mental plane, we have right here, you're probably thinking fear thoughts, you're worried, right? Might get a little frustrated. Your visualizations are like that. You're catastrophizing. You're thinking of worst outcomes. You're thinking, oh no, what if this happens? What if this scenario happens? What if that happens? What if she says this to me? What if I lose my job? What if this? What if that? You're now thinking this way. And then in the physical, you'll have to start getting things that are equal to what you're doing on these planes of existence, right? And one thing I want to leave you with that can help tie this together of how the mirror principle operates and how to look at your physical world is the idea of an energetic history. Remember that everything is of a like kind, just a different rate of vibration, that you are creating effects in your physical mainly through what you're doing in your spiritual and mental, and then the actions you take from that place. Yes, there's going to be physical action. When you're inspired to do something because you're doing higher things on the spiritual and mental, please take it. That's kind of how you complete the cycle. But this is going to bring in new opportunities, new people, new events, new circumstances, new ways of looking at things. You're going to be able to think more positively, more easily, feel better more often. But what you're going to start noticing is that your physical world, again, is an effect of what you're doing internally. It is an inner history or an energetic history. And I'll write this one down because I think this is important to keep in mind. So it's an energetic history. Meaning that everything you see around you in your life has come in as a result, for the most part, because of what you were doing in the past in your spiritual and mental plane of existence. And so if in the past, a lot, you were in fear, thinking about fear, feeling anger, feeling worried, feeling sadness, depression, anxiety, all of these different things, thinking that way as well, well, the physical or through the mirror principle, it can't deliver you anything else other than the corresponding physical equivalent of what you've been doing in that inner world. Now, this may seem a little bit disheartening if you've been doing that up till now or quite consistently, but I want to let you know that in the same way you created that energetic history, a new future is always available. A new future is always available, meaning at any moment, and I would recommend this moment, and then you can start working on this to start creating a new energetic history for yourself, to start utilizing the mirror principle, because the mirror principle cause and effect at a higher level. These things are going and occurring regardless of whether you're aware of it or regardless of whether you want to engage with it or not. It's happening either way. And so I believe it's certainly a benefit to learn how it works and then apply it so that you can use it to your benefit and so it serves you more in what you're trying to do here and what you want to experience. And if you want to experience more joy, happiness, peace, clarity, whatever it is, then use it. If you want certain different things on the physical plane, including better health, more money, better relationships, then use it. If you want to be one of the rare few who has complete control over their thoughts and the mental side of themselves, then use it. It doesn't care whether you know about it or not. In the same way electricity doesn't. If I go over here and flip this switch, I don't actually know exactly how flipping that switch leads to the light bulbs above me turning on. But it doesn't care. It's set up that way. If I flip the switch, it works. It happens. And it's the same here. If you think a certain way in the mental and feel a certain way in the spiritual, and you dwell in that place, there will be certain effects. It does not care if you know about that or not. It does not care, about whatever moral justification we think we have on why that should or shouldn't be the case. That is how it operates. The law is unfeeling, even though feelings are a big part of how you can utilize it. It just is these parameters, and you're going to get based on what you do with these parameters, right? It doesn't have a moral code. And so using it and recognizing a new future is always available. And so if you don't like what you're looking at right now, only you and you alone can change it. By utilizing the mirror principle to start thinking differently. You get what you think about most of the time. To start entertaining better feeling thoughts, to clear out the emotions you no longer want to have. To start taking the actions of inspiration when they start coming through, inevitably through doing this. And you absolutely can do it. And so this is the mirror principle, and so much of what I used to develop the six-figure business I now find myself in, the wonderful family I now have, the health, just being able to do what I love and wake up every single day and genuinely have a great day most days. Do I have a bad day every now and then? Absolutely, but it's not about perfection. In fact, you're dualistic. You will always experience both. But most people experience the negative side more often, and every now and then they feel some respite from that, relief from that by feeling good. But it doesn't need to be that way. You can feel good 95% of the time, and every 5% of the time, visit the other side of that. Fine. But most people, 95% of the time, quiet desperation, numb, neutral at best, living a life that they'd rather not live and want to live it differently. And then 5% of the time, maybe getting some relief from that, a moment of joy, a moment of happiness. It does not need to be that way. The mirror principle is always operating, and you can use it to your advantage. Now, if you want help with all this, to work with me and some guidance in doing so, I do have a reality creation program. We just opened, but we have limited spots because it's the first cohort. We're giving a huge discount, and we want to make sure we let in some really committed people. So if you think you're one of those and you want to take all this to the next level, learn this and way more, and not just to learn it, be held accountable, have someone hold your hand as you go through it. So if you do, you will make mistakes inevitably. We can just nudge you back on track. You'll be able to ask questions, be able to get feedback from myself and my partners. If you're interested in that, you can take a look down below at more information, what it entails, and everything else. It's the first link. You may have to copy and paste it because YouTube on this channel right now is not letting me use actual hyperlinks and having some trouble with that. But if you copy and paste it, you'll get there. Now, I also recommend going to watch this video next, which is going to be a great follow-up one from this one. Again, the more you tune into this kind of stuff, the more it gets embedded into your subconscious, the more you'll be able to use it automatically. You want it at your mental fingertips, as one of my mentors would say. So the more you can learn and utilize these processes, the better.